Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Monday, November 24th. This is Monday of Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving is Thursday. That also means this is week 14 of the 2025 college football season. It also means that it is Hate Week. That's right, Hate Week. Georgia Tech, Georgia, coming up this Friday afternoon, 3:30 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, we have a afternoon time slot. We are not exclusive to this week. There's actually a full slate of games on Friday, just like a Saturday, a noon game, the 3:30 game, and then the 7:30 game. Georgia Tech sits at that 3:30 slot. And it's going to be an exciting time. I am excited that we're on the Friday. Friday is a great time to have the games. It is a little bit more exclusive. There's less games than on the Saturday, and I think you get a lot of people just ready to do something after all day Thursday, family, food, and celebrations of Thanksgiving on Thursday. And so I think it's a great opportunity that they move this game to Friday, give it kind of one of the more exclusive time slots, and we'll have the game on ABC, and it's going to be great here. So just recentering the thing a little bit. So what are we looking at now for this week? Well, first and foremost, let's get back and just do some reactions and a quick recap of the Charlotte game this past weekend. And then we'll start talking about a little bit more about what we're going to look at in our Hate Week breakdown. So also, I'm working on an idea of a new format for the Daily Dawg show. I don't think it's going to be incorporated in today's, but I'm thinking about going quarters, just like football game. We're going to go first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and maybe have a break between them so you can actually chunk it out and listen to it. And I might put myself on the clock, give myself 15 minutes, just like a quarter, and we'll make the points that we're going to make in those quarters and go on. Today, I think will be a little bit shorter, though, because, again, we're just going to do some quick reactions to the game this last weekend against Charlotte, and then just throw out a few observations and things to get started focusing on Hate Week with Georgia Tech coming up this week. So, first and foremost, let's get back to Charlotte and talk about what happened this Saturday. And again, there's not a ton to break down here. A lot happened as expected, and there's just not so much we can draw from a game like this. But I think first and foremost, this game went just right on schedule, basically, at least to start. Georgia came out, and it was a little disappointing to not just take the ball and score first, but we punt, they punt. And but after an exchange of punts, Georgia takes the ball, moves right down the field and scores, and they're going to score on their next 4 drives, and they're going to force Charlotte to punt on their next 4 drives, and it's going to be a long time before they even pick up a first down. Charlotte is a vastly overmatched team, like I mentioned in the podcast before the game. Charlotte's not even good by the standards of the conference or the smaller schools that they come from. They're 1-9 coming in on the season this year, so just definitely not a good team. But that being said, in fact, I wanted to look something up here real quick. Oh, I'm not going to find it that way, I don't think. That's just by conference. I was just going to see. Now, I mentioned the other day on the most recent podcast that I had been working on a new statistical device, I guess, for lack of what you call it. I mean, a ranking system. And mostly what it is the idea is to kind of answer the question, like we get stuck in these arguments all the time where you say, well, Georgia's 9-1, best, maybe the second best team or the best team in the SEC, depending on how you look at it. And you start comparing and arguing about Indiana being 11-0, and you say, well, yeah, but Indiana's not played anybody. So part of this is to be able to look a little bit more at the schedule. And there are a couple metrics and things out there. There's strength of record, strength of schedule, which are supposed to give some context. And they do get thrown out in that argument. I say, well, Georgia has played a tougher schedule. Their strength of schedule, their strength of record is this, that, or the other. Indiana's is that. But for one thing, I don't know that those are comprehensive enough, and I don't know that they address just the key things that aren't just the schedule, but what do we see in statistics that tells you what's predictive of a team winning, or things that are important to a team winning, I guess. So the way I'm looking at it is, what I'm doing is I have gathered in my metric that I'm working on, and it's not quite finished yet, but I've done enough with it that I can start to see some data coming at, and that's where I'm going to start to tweak it. Again, I want the data to take me where it's going to go, not try to have too much presupposed ideas about it. On the other hand, if I don't bring some presupposed ideas to it, or maybe not presupposed ideas, but in other words, I have to look at the data and see if it correlates to some things that I think we do know and can know, and then look at how to adjust that. But basically what I'm doing is taking 10 key categories that I think are speak to game flow, that speak to game control, and that speak to the key statistical categories that show you whether or not a team is actually winning or losing games, and how impressively they're doing that, how much they're controlling the games while they're doing it. So these are total offense, total defense, scoring defense, turnover margin, third down conversions, opponents' third down conversions, time of possession, total number of first downs in the game, total number of opponents' first downs in the game. Those are the 10 categories that, out of all the statistics that you can look at, that I think are most important to look at and think about relative to whether or not teams are winning games. So I've got this new metric and I've been working at it. And again, it's not complete, but one thing it does do is it'll give me a little bit of a chance to see some relative information about teams and conferences. And just to give you an idea, I bring this up because to give you an idea, Charlotte in the American Conference comes in at 1-9 to the game we played this last weekend, and they were and I mentioned that right now I have 134 teams on this because the statistics that I'm using to start assembling the data to create what I'm calling this power statistical metric, or yeah, I guess that's it. I'm still working on that title. I think the idea right now is I like statistical or power, or statistical power metric, or metrics power statistical metric, something like that. You know, what is the power of this team relative to the metrics or their statistical metrics? That's kind of the idea. So out of 134 teams, and that's the data is coming out of the ncaa.org website on how these teams have accumulated on their statistics for the year. So they're showing 134 teams in FBS. Like I said, I think this season, 2 teams had moved up to be new FBS teams, so it should be 136 teams, but they're not showing them that way. But I don't think that's going to matter that much in our data. So for now, Charlotte came into this game ranked 132nd out of 134 teams in my power metric. And you just look across the board and you can see why. They were 115th in total offense, 134th in total defense, 128th in scoring offense, 131 in scoring defense, 117 in turnover margin. In fact, the only category they're not in the hundreds in was third down conversions. They actually are ranked 86th in the country in third down conversions. So this metric also, you look at the total points or the total value accumulated column, a little bit like golf I mentioned, you want it to be lower because you're going to accumulate total number of points. The lower number of points you have, the more that means you were close to, say, leading the country in that category. By this metric, you could have a total of, you could accumulate 1,340 points in this, the core part of this metric, and you don't want to accumulate any. I mean, what you'd rather do is you'd rather be first in every category, so you'd rather have 10 points, basically, would be the best you could do. 1,340 would be the worst you could do by total points. So Charlotte comes in having to this weekend having 1,137 points out of 1,340 on the negative. So again, pretty bad team. So we expected to win the game, and I said, look, Dogs are going to win this game. That's not what matters. What matters is having our guys get in some more practice, get out there, stay sharp, not get injured, see some young guys get in the game. I said, I was hoping that, we'd see Gunnar for maybe the first quarter, maybe the first half. I will say Gunnar was in the game longer than I expected. A lot of the starters were in the game a little bit longer than I expected, but some guys were featured in a way that I think was fantastic. And I know everybody saw and appreciated getting to see Bo Walker, right? Highly touted freshman running back. This was his fourth game. So at the moment, he's in the position where he's been able to play in 4 games this season, and yet still preserve his red shirt if he does not play in any more games from here. And, that's a decision, I guess, that they talk to the kids, the coaching staff does, and the coaching staff probably has their point of view about what they want to do on that. We've had enough people running the ball. We've had Dwight Phillips, aka Peanut, running the ball this year, and he got some good runs in this game as well. We've had Chauncey Bowens and Nate Frazier have been our top 2 backs, and so we finally seen almost getting back to what you've seen traditionally, where Georgia doesn't necessarily have a feature back who's going to get 12 or 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns, but has had a pair of backs who are often getting anywhere from 7, 8, 900 yards in a season to maybe up to 1,000 yards in a season. We hadn't seen a 1,000-yard rusher in a while in the Georgia backfield. Go back to the Sony Michel, Nick Chubb days. You had a pair of 1,000-yard rushers in the backfield. So, and maybe I'd have to go back and look. Maybe as recently as DeAndre Swift and trying to think who else would have been back there. And maybe we had but in the last time DeAndre Swift was on there, we might have had a pair of 1,000-yard rushers. But last year, rushing game was not up to snuff. This year, run game's doing much better. And so this was a game where we committed to the run. This is another game where we want to do what we call take the air out of the game, right? Just like we tried to run against Texas and sort of take the air out of the game in the middle portion of the game, didn't work so well. Texas defense stood up and made us kind of drag it into the fourth quarter before we were able to put it away. This is a game where you want to take the air out of the game the whole game. Just kind of run the ball as much as you can, eat as much clock as possible so that you can get in and out of this thing without getting anybody hurt, but get some good practice. And that's mostly what Georgia did. Georgia's going to score on 4 straight possessions after the first possession, get up to a 28-0 lead, and everything's looking pretty good going to the half, with the exception of we did get the ball back with a couple minutes to go in the half, and Gunnar throws a pretty ugly interception, actually, an ill-advised pass, a little bit over the middle, a little bit well defended, and not a good pass, didn't get enough on it. It's underthrown. Not only does it get picked off, but it gets returned deep into Georgia territory, and Charlotte was able to capitalize on that, get just far enough into Georgia territory after that to reach for what turned out to be their longest field goal of the year, 43 yards. We were not able to block it or stop it. They get the field goal, and so that's your halftime score, 28-3. Not much else happens in the second half. We come out in the second half, put another touchdown on the board to make it 35-3. And then we start to see the secondary people get in the game more. Puglisi gets in the game somewhere by the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. And eventually Ryan Montgomery does get in the game, get a chance to throw a pass. Would have liked to have seen them play more, would have liked to have seen them have more in the game. This was not like, I think we were all a little disappointed going back to the beginning of the season. Marshall, Austin P. didn't feel like the starters took control early enough and got some of the younger guys in the game as much. Didn't rout the game. I will say, watching Alabama kind of had our same game. They were playing Eastern Illinois, and they were able to basically almost play a consistently perfect game. If you look at it, they rack up 500 or 600 yards of offense. They held Eastern Illinois to 35 yards of total offense, no points whatsoever, and they methodically scored every time they touched the ball. They scored 2 touchdowns in each quarter, so just 14, 14, 14, 14. You look at the box score, it looks great. So 56-0 for Alabama. And I think we could have done that here. I would have liked to, but again, I didn't want to see that done with our starters. I wanted to see such a high level executed from our young guys that we could dominate a bad team like Charlotte, even with our second, third, fourth, and fifth string guys. That may have been a little bit unrealistic. Obviously, one of the things we've watched all season is that this team has been younger and less experienced. And while there's a lot of former 4 and 5 star recruits out there on the team, it's definitely taken a while for those guys to emerge. But they have. We have seen people emerge throughout the season, guys. And this is a game where we continue to see people just continue getting better and better. So, Chris Cole had a sack in this game, some tackles for loss. Just had a good game. You saw his number being called more. It's good to see him stepping up with C.J. Allen out. And a couple other guys on defense really just continue to just explode forward, and so we're really glad of what we're seeing there. Noah Thomas had a nice game, was leading receiver in terms of catches and yardage, I think, but maybe him and Zach had the same number of catches. But again, really nice to see how Noah Thomas seemed to be struggling early in the season, or we were struggling to get him into the game and get him going. We certainly are not. We'd like to have had him going and Colby Young at the same time. So sad to have lost Colby Young, but Noah Thomas has stepped up. Not quite as physical, a runner or blocker as Colby Young, but constantly improving. And all of a sudden you look down and Noah Thomas got 4 touchdowns, 250 something yards, and is just making play after play each week. So nice to see him continue. Zachariah Branch is Zachariah Branch. He's just putting on a clinic, heading towards 700, 800, 900 yards, maybe of receiving this season. Maybe a while. We'll talk about that later this week. How, as we look at this team finalizing its regular season, look back and see how some of these guys perform, like the running backs in the run game and the wide receivers and the tight ends, and compare them to some of our players of old. We'll do that a little bit more this week as we get going later into Hate Week. Georgia does have its best overall defensive game of the season. Again, to be expected against a team like Charlotte, but even compared to the Austin Peay and Marshall games, hold Charlotte here to 169 yards of offense and just the 3 points. And those 3 points came on the turnover that got them the ball in our territory. Seems very likely they never would have gotten there had we not given them the turnover. So could have been a shutout, but the 3 points helps drive down Georgia's points per game allowed. Yardage went back down, so now Georgia is in 12th and 14th in total offense in terms of points allowed and yardage allowed. So that defense, and we talked about that. Look, this is Georgia's played a lot of its, and all the SEC teams for the most part, most of the SEC teams are holding back one of these cupcake payday games to create some separation. We're out of off weeks. And so this is kind of a way in which we create a little bit of separation between, so like last week, we had the big game against Texas, a top ranked team, heavyweight team in our conference. And then we've got our big rivalry game against Tech now this week. And so in between, you get this breather. Alabama had Eastern Illinois in between, playing Oklahoma at home the week before and having to go do the Iron Bowl this coming week. Auburn, also the other side of the Iron Bowl, they had Mercer this week. So you see that up and down the conference. And so one of the things that you would be expecting is that all of a sudden, some of our stats are going to look a little bit healthier. Had we had this sort of cupcake payday game back in the beginning, and most teams play all of these games more in the beginning of the season, then the stats from this game would have been contributing to a little better look on paper. But now it comes in, and all of a sudden, now you see, okay, now we're almost winning games, 15.9 points a game, almost 16 points a game now. After this game, all of a sudden, like I said, the offense is solidly inside the top 30 now, 29 and 26, I think, in terms of yardage and points allowed. Defense has moved into the 14 and 12 in terms of yardage and points allowed. So now you're starting to move into that, not just top third in the country and not just even the top 20, but now the defense is moving up into elite statistics. And, when you talk about being the 12th best team in the country in terms of points allowed and yardage allowed, 14th best in the country in points allowed, yardage allowed, that's you're really moving into some high cotton there, right? And that's what you're going to want to see. That's what you're going to want to have on paper that kind of goes with the eye test. The eye test is this defense has been getting better and better. Well, and they have. They are getting better and better, and we're finally starting to see some aggressive play, and we're starting to believe in them. They're getting pressure. They got a couple more sacks in this game. So now all of a sudden, after going like 8 games with 8 sacks, now Georgia's had 8 sacks in its last 3 games. So we're getting more pressure. We're stopping people more. This Charlotte goes 1 for 11, I think, on third down attempts in this game. So Georgia was able to convert 4 of 11. So our third down conversions for and against. Again, the stats continue to improve. We held the ball about 38 minutes in this game. So our time of possession, which we're in the top 7, 8, 9 in the country in that stat continues to go up, just showing how we control the game along with our run game. We ran for over 190 yards. So we continue to average about 190 yards a game rushing. And so generally speaking, you're really seeing things round into form. We outgained Charlotte by 280. I've mentioned yardage differential between offense and defense, offense gained and defense allowed, I think is one of those metrics that tells you a lot about how the game went, not just did you win or lose. And so we outgained Charlotte by 280 yards in this game. We improved our overall differential on the season to over 135 now. So, and again, nice to see our yardage allowed under 300. That's always an elite measurement right there. Don't know if we'll be able to stay there because, again, you got Georgia Tech came into their game this last weekend as the number 1 offense in the country in terms of yardage, just under 500 yards a game. Nobody is averaging 500 yards a game anymore coming into this week. We'll take a look at the stats again later here in Hate Week to see how the other teams are done. I haven't had a chance to refresh those as just kind of reactions to what we saw this weekend and quick reactions to what to expect this week. That's our goal here today. And then we're going to start breaking stuff down, including, of course, we'll have new playoff rankings available on Tuesday. So we'll get a chance to talk some more about playoff rankings. And I gave you some of my thoughts in the last podcast. I have a very different set of rankings for my top 15, top 16 compared. And I went ahead and did it to top 16. Only to include Georgia Tech since we had that game coming up. So anyway, that's a lot of quick summary about what happened in the Charlotte game. We've talked about all season. Georgia doesn't show out. Georgia's not going to, chunk the ball downfield for 60-yard touchdowns and bomb a team like this 70-0. Georgia's just going to play its game. And in many ways, we actually play a much more methodical and more conservative game in these payday cupcake practice type games, because again, the goal is to focus on things like the run game, getting other guys in, just chewing through the clock and executing on each play, and executing the same way that we execute throughout the season. We're not going to do something different in a game like this just because we can. We're not going to go for just big chunk plays and see if we can put 45 points on the board in the first quarter. That's not how Georgia's going to play it. So, I would have liked to have seen the second and third and fourth string guys. Once Ryan Puglisi was in the game, I was really hoping to see him air out a few passes, have a nice mix of run game and passing game, and see him lead one or two drives. He had enough time. He had multiple drives that he led, and I would have liked to have seen him get at least one drive down the field and get a score off of that, even a field goal. We weren't able to do that. They moved the ball, got a couple first downs on a few drives, but ended up punting a couple times because they just weren't able to sustain and keep those drives going. So I think one time maybe one went over on downs because we were in what would have been a long field goal range, and so they went for the fourth down instead. Just not as crisp and impressive as I would have liked with the young guys, but admittedly, what we have seen is a lot of these young guys getting crisper and better as the first and second teamers who've continued to improve and move Georgia from a team that both as fans, we were questioning, is this a championship potential team? Where how much do I invest and believe in? I mean, we're always invested. We always believe in Georgia football, but really deep down inside, do we think this is a championship season, or are we going to be surprised? And we've watched this team evolved, and they are what their record says they are. They are a legitimate number 4 team in the country. When you look around them, that's a very reasonable ranking compared to how they compare to the other teams. And you look at what we did against Texas, and and again, Texas is not the greatest team in the country, right? All right. They were ranked number one, preseason number one. They now have 3 losses on the season, but we talked about this as we broke down the Texas game. They are a legitimately high-level talent team, and they can at any time start to put it together, much like we put it together. And it did actually appear that they were improving as the week or as the season went on until they got to the Georgia game. And validating that a little bit, they did explode offensively. So they had a couple 400-yard plus offensive games. Manning had a couple 300-yard, 3 touchdown games in a row coming into the game against Georgia. Obviously, they didn't have that kind of success, so you might have thought, well, maybe it's just who they were playing. And it might still be, because Arkansas is one of the worst teams in our conference, one of the not-so-great teams in the country, but fired their coach already. Arkansas is 90th in the country on my power stat metric. So, not a great team. But anyway, either way, Texas got into that game, and that's something of a rivalry game for them. It's kind of one of those anything can happen type games, a little bit like when we play South Carolina. Arkansas historically, of course, has national championship and greatness in their history, but it's been a while. And at this point, I think the Texas-Arkansas rivalry probably does mirror a little bit the Georgia-South Carolina rivalry, in the sense that South Carolina definitely has a rivalry with us, and we certainly don't want to lose to South Carolina, and we've had some great games against them, and there have been some good matchups throughout time and history. But for the most part, Georgia's just sort of owned that series well, and should win most of the time. And I think that's kind of where Texas-Arkansas is. Nonetheless, Texas jumped out to a lead. Arkansas cut it, got down to like 24-20 coming around halftime. But Texas was able to just keep putting points on the board, and they end up winning this thing. I think 52-37 was the final score. So Texas gets back on the win side. They generate over 400 yards of offense. Arch had over 350 yards, I think about 389 yards passing, and he caught a touchdown pass, ran for a touchdown, and threw for a touchdown in a game, something I think no Texas quarterback had ever done before, if I saw that graphic pop up right. So Arch got back onto a much more dominant performance. They won the game, had a little separation between them and Arkansas, and now they set up the big matchup upcoming with Texas A&M. So I think that kind of helps legitimize the idea that the Texas did have some momentum and was getting better, and Arch was getting better offensively coming into the game against Georgia. So again, think what that shows us is it doesn't mean, hey, we have the greatest defense in the history of the world. Doesn't mean, hey, we should be number one. We beat Texas. It just says, hey, Texas is a legitimately high talented team that have been struggling on offense, but they're starting to pull it together. And the Georgia defense did a great job of putting pressure on them, getting after them, putting them back down to lower averages and to where they only scored 10 points and, did not generate a lot of yardage, did not generate a lot of first downs, and Georgia was able to thoroughly win that game. And that looks a little better as Texas advances now to 8-3 and has a chance to go to 9-3 and bag a win against a top 5 opponent if they can beat Texas A&M at home. I'm not saying they can, but they have that opportunity now. So, where do we want to go from here? So I guess that's just that's sort of the key idea, was that, Texas. And so let's look at that. While we're there, I guess let's say this. So what do we want? Well, as Georgia fans, we'd like to see Texas rebound and win the game against A&M. And there's 2 good reasons for that. I mean, yes, that would take an undefeated team, and the SEC would no longer have, it would have one less top 5 team, because Texas isn't going to jump if they beat A&M. They're not going to swap places from 17th or 20, whatever in the country in the rankings now, all the way up to number 3 where Texas A&M is. They won't even make it probably back to the top 10 off of just beating Texas A&M if they're able to do that. So perception of the SEC could take a hit, because all of a sudden we have one of our top ranked teams that falls, our only undefeated team falls. From a Georgia only perspective, not an SEC at the whole perspective, we didn't play Texas A&M, and so Texas A&M going undefeated and having a powerful record may make the SEC look good, but it isn't going to make our strength of record or our metrics any better. So we don't gain anything by Texas A&M being undefeated. But if Texas is able to beat Texas A&M and climb back into the teens out of the 20s in the rankings, finish the season in the top 25, in the top 15, have a 9-3 record, where you can look back and say, hey, look at Georgia's resume, look at Georgia's record. We were able to beat a team that finished with 9 or 10 wins in the top 15, a team that was overall a very good team. So we're going to get more value for as Georgia if Texas is able to go out and beat Texas A&M, and if Texas beats Texas A&M, as we've talked about before, that's going to propel us into the SEC championship game. In that scenario, it would most likely be against against Alabama, provided they don't lose to Auburn, is what I was going to say. And at the moment, I'm thinking, I'm not ready to go full breakdown analysis on this yet, but my gut instinct from right now says that Texas has a better shot of beating Texas A&M than Auburn has of beating Alabama. But I will say that Auburn had some juice in their game. I mean, they fell behind. When I first looked at the score, they were down 14-7 to Mercer, and I thought, oh my gosh. But I think they went on to win like 67-17 or something, and they had a young quarterback start in his first ever game, and it looked like he waited till about 3/4 of the way through the game to pass the ball, but that was okay because I think every time he touched the ball, took or called his own number, at the quarterback position, taking off running. Looks like his first play from scrimmage was like a 75-yard touchdown run, and he had several other long touchdown runs. So a good debut for him as a freshman starting quarterback. Don't know if that's the kind of thing that's going to hold up or dealing with Alabama compared to playing Mercer. But hey, maybe, look, these teams are all dangerous when you are a higher ranked team and you go to play them because they're your rival, especially in a situation like Auburn. If I'm the coach, the interim coach of Auburn, I'm not punting the ball. I'm going for every fourth down. I mean, maybe I wouldn't punt it for my own, or maybe I wouldn't go for it for my own 5, right? But I mean, I'm saying, why would you leave anything on the table? You're probably not in the running to be hired as the coach. The only thing you can do is take a memorable opportunity to take down a big rival in the Iron Bowl, and so you should pull out all the stops. And there's just no reason not to. If you're Auburn, the team, the players, and the coaching staff over there. So that makes them dangerous. That makes them unpredictable. A team that's got something to play for, a team that's looking at their standing in the playoffs or a bowl game or their overall win-loss record, and they've had a decent season going, they're not going to do crazy stuff like punt, like go for it from their own 30. But why not if you're Auburn in this game? And so when you have a team that's playing with that kind of reckless abandon, and they have talent, as Auburn does, they are a top 25 talent index team. So when they have talent, when they play with reckless abandon, and they play like they've got nothing to lose, and the only thing that's going to make anything memorable about their season is winning this game, and they're not even a winning record team at the moment. So without winning this game, you could probably project they're not even going to go to a bowl game. So this could be their last game of the season. So why not sell out? Why not give it everything? That makes them dangerous, and that's going to be a potentially dangerous situation for Alabama to have to deal with. That being said, I still feel like they're more likely to be able to deal with that and handle that than Texas A&M is going to be able to shake off and of course that's not even an equal fight, right? I mean, Texas is a legitimate top 25 team. Texas A&M is a top 3 team. Alabama is a legitimate top 10 team. Auburn is maybe not even a bowl eligible team, maybe not even a 500 team on the season. If they lose this game, they're going to be a sub 500 team. So, and of course they've already fired their coach and looking for a new coach. So, for us, this brings me to my frustration. So look, Georgia Tech here. Let's talk about Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech goes out on the plains, or on the flats. I'm sorry, the plains is Auburn. Georgia Tech takes the field at the flats of Georgia Tech at Grant Field at Bobby Dodd Stadium, and they have not lost a home game in their last 10 home games. I guess the last time they lost a home game was in the 2023 season when we beat them. So they had like a 10-game home winning streak there. And look, that's our right. That's what we do, is we go to the Bobby Dodd Stadium and win. Other teams aren't supposed to. So Pittsburgh comes in, and yeah, they had just been bounced out of the rankings last week after getting smacked down by Notre Dame in an ugly game. But they also came in with only one loss in the ACC and in contention for the ACC. Georgia Tech came into the game with, if they win the game, they're in the ACC championship game. So Georgia Tech comes into this game this last weekend controlling their destiny. And certainly on paper, a more powerful and higher ranked team than Pittsburgh, who's just outside the top 25, whereas Tech is a top 15, 16, 18 team. So they get off to a horrible start. They get buried and they're down 28-0. They fight back and they slowly work it back to, by the time you get to into the fourth quarter, they get it to 35-28. They pull within 28-14, and then give up a interception return for a touchdown that goes the other way, makes it 35-14. So again, Tech has to keep working to come back. They get it to 35-28, and then they are not able to force Pittsburgh to punt when they're on their side of the field. Pittsburgh gets a couple first down, gets over midfield, then breaks off like a 40-yard run. Pittsburgh's running back runs for over 200 yards in the game. This guy rushes off to the end zone on a 30, 40-something yard run, puts Pittsburgh up 42-28, and that's where it ends. Tech isn't able to do anything else. Next time they get the ball back, they give the ball back on downs. Just a crying shame, really. I mean, I'm very disappointed in Tech, I've been saying, and I know a lot of you may think this is a sort of a controversial point of view for a Georgia fan. I've been rooting for Tech and saying, look, I want Georgia Tech to be one of the best teams in the country so that when we play this big rivalry game on Thanksgiving, on Friday after Thanksgiving, that everybody in the country is tuning in for must-see TV to watch this thing. And part of how that's going to work is the other team has to be good. And we've seen that. Georgia is bringing the eyeballs to TV. We've had multiple games. I think the most games of anybody so far that have had like 10 million or more viewers. And so when Georgia's, the Texas game had like 10.4 million viewers against in that game. So Georgia's one of the most watched teams in the country. So if Tech would do their job, win the games. Now look, they're coming into this better. Last year with the bowl game and everything, Tech finished up 7-6. They're already 9-2 so far on the season. So even if they lose to us and lose the bowl game, they're going to finish 9-4. 9-4 is a 2-game improvement and showing steady improvement on last year's 7-6 record, which was an improvement on having a losing record the year before that. So Tech is making improvements, and it's a lot to ask for a team to jump from 7-6 to 11-1. And so I know that's what I'm asking, but their conference is weak, and they've done a good job up to now. But maybe what we're seeing is that they played out the string, that they got to 9 wins, which was always going to be 9 or 10 wins was maybe the ceiling for this team. They just got there at a point where you might have thought there was something else. You might have thought that they were an ACC championship contender. You might have thought they were a playoff team. Well, all of that came crashing down in these last couple of weeks. They've lost 2 of their last 3. One to NC State, who is not a good team. NC State is ranked 100 or worse in my power metric ranking. So they are not a good team. And Tech went on the road and lost to them in an ugly shootout game where defense was just completely forgotten about, or people were allergic to it. I'm not sure what. But they lose on the road. They come home. They get a win. And then they get Pittsburgh. And now they lose at home to Pittsburgh. And this is their first home loss since 2023. They lose their 10-game win streak at home, and they lose their control of the ACC, and they've lost their opportunity to get into the playoff, most likely. I mean, possibly a win against Georgia changes the playoff mix. It's not going to change the ACC. They're out of the ACC. They're not going to make that. And getting into the ACC championship game, look, there's no great teams in the ACC. So if they got in that game, they could have controlled their destiny and won their way into the playoff, winning the game. But now they're not going to have that opportunity. They're out. They're eliminated by taking that loss. And Pittsburgh is actually possibly in that position. I think Pittsburgh and Virginia are your 2 top teams maybe to make the ACC championship right now. But I don't think, I mean, look, Tech's 9-2 now. So if they were able to beat us, they jump to 10-2. They're holding on in the AP poll. We don't know about the playoff poll yet, but they're holding on the AP poll in the bottom in the 20s. They lost like 8 spots for the loss over the weekend. But if they beat us, they would obviously jump back up probably all the way into the teens. I don't think they jump enough, though. I don't think they could get at 9-1. They were ranked 16 in the playoff poll. And so even if they beat us, I think they would only bounce back to 17, 16, 15 at best. So probably not going to be a playoff season no matter what. Might have had a chance if they'd beaten us and beat Pittsburgh and gone to the ACC championship game. Again, they could have either played their way in and gotten the automatic bid for the ACC, or maybe just played their way in so good, like SMU last year, who played their way in so well that even when Clemson beat them in the ACC championship game, they still got a large bid. All that seems to be off the table now for Georgia Tech. But like I said, look, let's be realistic. Maybe as far as, I don't think they added a significant talent. Haynes King is one of the grittiest and toughest quarterbacks in football and a playmaker. Maybe not the greatest passer, but he is a playmaker. And I certainly believe in Haynes King. So they had Haynes King last year. They still have Haynes King. And they lost a couple players in the portal, but they still have some good players. I didn't see that they brought in a lot more talent. At best, basically, Tech maybe sort of treaded water a little bit talent-wise. Maybe they got a little better this year talent-wise. So, but Brent Key has done a great job coaching them. He's definitely, much like Kirby, he's brought his own demand that they play with fire, passion, energy. That's not the phrase they're using, but they have definitely played with heart and grit, and they have reflected their coach, who's tough-nosed and hard fight, we are going to be a hard-fought team, a hard team to play, and they've definitely embodied that. But it's possible that the talent gap, that they just don't have a lot of defensive talent, is starting to show up, and effort is starting to wane a little bit. These last few weeks, they are averaging, and now for the season on defense, they're averaging giving up over 400 yards a game. So as much as I keep pointing to being under 300 yards a game defensively is an elite metric, being over 400 yards a game is a horrible metric. That's a bottom third of football metric, and it's a hard way to win games. Even if you do have the number one offense in the country, as Tech had coming into the week in terms of yardage gained, even if you have that, it's very hard to win when you're giving up over 400 yards a game. So far, they're only averaging giving up about 25 points a game, but again, they've lost 2 of 3, including now to NC State and Pittsburgh. So maybe they've peaked, and maybe it's enough that it'll be at least a top 25 matchup. I just feel like there was more on the table in a weak ACC for Georgia Tech, and I'm disappointed they weren't able to do it. They weren't able to hold on and give us a much better matchup. And again, I know a lot of you Georgia fans out there may be thinking, what is he talking about? Why does he care? I just think, look, I'll say it this way. You're going to play this game every year. It's on our schedule every year. Okay, so we could go out, if we didn't have this game on the schedule, we can either schedule more Charlottes, more Austin Peays, more Marshalls, or we can schedule another marquee matchup against another Power 4 team. So we've had the games against Clemson the last few years. We had the game against Oregon a couple of years ago. We've had series with Oklahoma planned before we knew they were going to be in the conference, so we had to cancel that. But we had the Notre Dame series back in 2017, 2019. So we could play more of those games if we're not playing Georgia Tech every year. But we're playing Georgia Tech every year because this is a great in-state rivalry matchup. It's an exciting, big-time rivalry, and it's got a lot of history in it, so much so that it has its own name, Clean Old-Fashioned Hate. That's ugly. Hate is ugly, and that's where this is. There is hate there, right? So I can't think of a better way of saying that at the moment, but I'm sure I will as the week goes on. But you get what I'm getting at, and that's something to build on. So look, we're going to play this game. It's a rivalry game. It's a historic game. Georgia Tech is one of the top 25 or 30 teams all time in the history of college football. They have 4 national championships to their credit. They're in the top 25 or 30 all-time wins. They're approaching 800 wins as a program. They have some history. They had Coach Heisman the Heisman Trophy named after a guy who coached at Georgia Tech. So Bobby Dodd is an amazing coach, right? A historically great coach, Hall of Fame coach. So, I'd like to see them be that kind of team. So again, I don't want to hear, like I saw on Substack, I saw guys that do a column about Ohio State football, and I saw their headline of their article coming into this week with the big Michigan, the game. Okay. Like, again, these guys are so excited. Anyway, what they said, the point I was getting at, I saw a couple first paragraphs of their most recent article, and it just, mentioned, okay, it's time for the greatest rivalry in sports or greatest rivalry in college football. I hate hearing that. Okay. And I mean, I'm a homer, obviously, for SEC. I'm a homer for Georgia, but I hate this idea. I just think it's ridiculous that it gets printed. Like, why? Why is Ohio State and Michigan such a great rivalry? I mean, outside of Ohio State or Michigan, who really cares? At one point in the history of college football, sure, those teams dominated. And yes, they're still two of the great teams of all-time college football. And yes, they both just won back-to-back national championships in 24 and 23. So although Michigan hadn't won one since the 90s before that, Ohio State had been pulling their weight, but Michigan hadn't. But Michigan got back in there and won a national championship. But again, it's just, there's just the idea that, the game is so great. The game, like, not the Iron Bowl, not clean old fashioned hate, not the Red River rivalry or or Bedlam. What a great name, right? Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. I love that one. Bedlam. What a great name for a rivalry. The game, the tradition. They're going to dot the I. A tuba player is going to go stand in a certain part of the field. It's amazing. Nobody could dot the I. I mean, the script Ohio is cool. It's great. They spell it out. But look, marching bands have been, a lot of marching bands out there that form some really great stuff. Compete even, go to competitions and like, look at what we do. We march and we form this, that, and the other. They're doing it the same over and over again. They always do it. That's great. We do block letters, spell Georgia cheer, G-E-O. Okay. I mean, it's not exciting. It's a block, but I like it. I enjoy it. I'm not running around telling everybody it's the greatest thing in the history of sports that we can just spell our name in script and then we send a tuba player out to dot the I. But, between the game and the greatest, and they're so wonderful, I'm just tired of hearing it. And, a Florida State, that rivalry in the 90s, that was the best game ever. Convicts versus Catholics. Miami and Notre Dame, that was an amazing rivalry with some juice. And these are games that when they were played, the winner went on to win the national title almost every time. Now, granted, Ohio State and Michigan have definitely won their fair share of national titles, and probably more often than not, the seasons that they won involved winning that game. But I mean, I don't know that it's just normally true that the winner of the Big Ten, as seen by the two best teams playing each other at the end of the year every year in the game, is all that important to us nationally. It certainly hasn't been. It might have been in the 60s and 70s, but for most of the last 20 years, the game hasn't meant that much to us outside of Ohio and Michigan. So I think a lot of other games, some of these other rivalries I mentioned at different times have been bigger and meant more. So, I mean, even the Iron Bowl for a couple of years there, Auburn, Alabama won national championship 2009. Auburn wins the national championship 2010. Alabama comes back and wins in 11 and 12. So in 4 years, the Iron Bowl, the winner of the Iron Bowl, won the national championship each of 4 straight years. Okay, so the Iron Bowl was huge for those 4 years. I don't think the game has regularly produced that kind of drama or that kind of importance nationally in much of the last 20 years or so. So I don't know why we have to just keep accepting that it's the greatest. So again, that's part of my bent. Georgia Tech could be the greatest rivalry. It's clean old-fashioned hate. These teams hate each other. They're historically great teams. And if they would meet every year as top 25 teams with the playoffs on the line, then it would just add to that mystique. And Georgia Tech needs to do their part. So maybe I'll cut them a little slack and say, look, they've taken a step forward this year, but I'm disappointed. I'm sure Tech fans are disappointed. So I know they wanted to come into the game and be, and look, what I'll say is be in the top 10, top 15. But obviously, if you lose to Pittsburgh, that's not going to happen. I'm sure they wanted to come in and have the playoffs on the line, or even imagine that maybe this will be the first of two games that were played here at the end of the season. Then again, we meet in the playoffs. I mean, that would be a dream for Georgia Tech, right? To get in the playoff and have a chance to beat Georgia, knock them out of the playoff and advance themselves. But obviously the ceiling for this team wasn't there. Doesn't mean they can't beat us, by the way. They're still good enough to beat us. My initial instinct is right now, ESPN's predictive model shows we're like 80, 86%, 84% chance to win. Looks like the line is open at about 13.5 points. There's a lot of people mocking Georgia Tech for selling this game into the Georgia Dome and pointing out, not the Georgia Dome, I keep making that mistake, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and sort of mocking them and saying, hey, they might have got all this money for selling their home game, but they're going to be embarrassed when the stadium is 70% Georgia fans. And that may happen. I think that for a while we were on the road to seeing a record number of Tech fans show up, represent their school, and really care in a big game because they'd been building this momentum in the season, a lot of excitement. I don't know what this game does. I don't know if this takes that away. I don't know if all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I'm not as excited now. I'm not going to shell out big bucks to go to this game and get all fired up, knowing that, we're probably not as good as I thought we were and we're probably going to get beat again. They might have a little bit of that syndrome where they just expect to get beat. I'm not really sure. I can't read the total mood of the Tech fan on this. On another hand, they should look at this as the best chance they've had in years. They've lost 7 straight coming into this game against Georgia. And just to talk a little bit about, I always give the perspective or my perspective on rivalries and the histories of these things. Since I stepped foot on campus as a freshman, we actually lost to Georgia Tech that first year. And I remember it. And I remember Rodney Hampton. Again, I made mention he was really the offense of our team that year in 1989. And I think he got his ankle torn up on Tech's horrible, hard AstroTurf. They had the old awful AstroTurf. The game was at Tech back then. They had that AstroTurf that broke somebody's leg or tore somebody's knee or ankle every other play, it seemed like. And they had that AstroTurf, and Hampton had an injury, was out of the game, and once he was out of the game, he was our team. And so the defense just started getting more and more worn down. Tech ran the ball, and I think the score was, I'll look it up, but I think it was like 33-22 or something like that. But I remember that game. That was painful to watch as my first year, and we actually lost the first 2 games against Tech. So I actually sort of started with a little bit of agony, a little bit of something that a lot of Georgia fans aren't used to, which is watching Tech. Only knowing, since you were paying attention, that Tech was winning those games. Granted, that was just those 2 years. But since then, we are 27-8 overall in the 35 years that I've been personally been a part of the Georgia Tech rivalry. So obviously we've done pretty well, and that includes a couple stretches of like 7 wins. I would like to see us win this game because in the history of the series, Georgia Tech has the longest win streak ever. Back in the Bobby Dodd era, in the 50s, they were able to win 8 straight games, and the best Georgia's ever done is multiple 7-game streaks, one of which we're on now. So we can, again, correct a historical inequity. It's hard to think of the series being too inequitable. Georgia leads the overall series 72-41-5, I think it is. This is another one of those series with a little bit of controversy because actually it's Georgia this time that doesn't want to count a couple games that are in the record books. Georgia did not officially field an A-level team for the 1943, 42, 44 season. 2 years during the war, the World War II, Georgia did not field a high level team. And so, or maybe even 4 years, but we did not, so we did not count. We didn't think we had a varsity team on the field. We had some guys that volunteered to play, and we let them go out and play games, and they continue to play games to try to keep things normalized or whatever. And there's a whole history and story about that, but we didn't field a frontline varsity team. And in fact, our top guys who had gone 11-1 in 1942 and had been the guys that's a season that we have claimed as a national championship season. Those guys went off to war, and they were gone, and they were gone until 1946. And they came back in 1946, and they went undefeated in 1946, which I also think we should be claiming as a national championship, and but we're not. So I think that's a miss. But they came back after the war, same guys that were on the team in 1942. They came back, and all of a sudden we're back to an undefeated national championship quality team. So we didn't have those guys, and we didn't field a varsity team by our standards in 1942. Okay, so when those guys came back from the war and got back on the field in 1946, and we go undefeated. Anyway, two of the teams during the 1940s time frame, during the World War II time frame there, we considered that we didn't field a varsity team. So for many years, we were not counting those in the record book, and Georgia Tech was counting those because they won both of those games. And I think, by the way, they continued fielding a varsity team and playing a varsity schedule during that time. I'll look that up to be sure, but I think that's what was happening. So I think that, but I think when I look at how Georgia is recording those now, currently we do seem to be recording these teams in our history. I mean, those games in our history. We do seem to show the record as 72-39. I said 41. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I take it back. Nope. Georgia is not counting those. We're calling it 72, 39, and 5. Okay. See, I missed that part. I saw the 72, and I had it reversed in my head, because that's right. We took the losses in those 2 years. Whereas if you look in most of the other record books and most of the other sources, and definitely in Georgia Tech's record books, the series is listed as 72, 41, and 5. And we listed as 72, 39, and 5. So this is another one of those rivalry. And this is funny that Georgia has so many of these moments, like with Florida. We got a couple of these series now where we can't even agree on how many times we've actually played each other. So I think that's just funny, and I get a big kick out of that. So from Georgia's perspective, this is 72, 39, and 5, and we're not counting those couple years of the wins. So, but what is still at play, like I said, is that in this game, Georgia could even the all-time record of the series of who has won the most games in a row, Tech having won 8 in a row back in the 50s. And it'd be great to see Georgia get back on the on top of that one and tie Georgia Tech with 8 overall win. So yeah, Georgia Tech's longest win streak was actually from 1949 to 1956, 8 straight wins. Georgia Tech's largest margin of victory in the history of the series was 48 points. They had a 48-0 win in 1943. Georgia has won 7 straight a couple times, including currently, and Georgia's largest margin of victory was 45-0. The 2021 game was 45-0. So be nice to see us get that 8th straight win in this series. Obviously, be nice to win this game just to preserve our top 5 ranking and our standing moving into the playoffs. We don't know what's going to happen in the SEC championship yet. I was talking about if Texas, just to go back to that for a moment, if Texas is able to beat Texas A&M, that would put us in the SEC championship game against Alabama, provided that they beat Auburn. If they were to lose to Auburn, that would also put us in the SEC championship game, even if Texas A&M wins out. And if both of them lose, I think we still end up probably with then I think we could end up in the game. I don't know if I think it'd be Ole Miss. If Ole Miss wins the Egg Bowl and Texas A&M and Auburn and Alabama both lose, Alabama would be with 2 losses. They would be out. A&M, Ole Miss, and Georgia would all have 1 loss. And so the 2 teams that would advance would be the 2 teams with the best record, which would, I believe, be Georgia and Ole Miss. So those are still some odd scenarios, and I would enjoy a Georgia Ole Miss. I don't really want a rematch with Ole Miss, but a Georgia Ole Miss SEC championship game would at least be a fresh matchup. So would a Georgia Texas A&M. That would be a fresh matchup, and it'd be a fresh opportunity to see either Ole Miss or Texas A&M. Those would be first time entrants. Neither of those teams has ever been in an SEC championship before, but the most likely scenario is I think that Texas A&M loses. And Georgia gets into the game against Alabama. And not only is that not a fresh scenario, that's a fairly stale scenario. We have certainly seen our share of Georgia-Alabama SEC championship games of late. But I don't have a bad feeling about that one either, because I would like our chances to get a rematch on that and see if we can't get back off of this 9 out of 10 losing problem that we got going on against Alabama and get back on a win and get a win in a key big moment in the SEC championship and just in time to, go on and play into the playoffs. So I think that would be great. So we'll see what happens there. But Georgia Tech, go back to my key point. Georgia Tech, we're going to play this game every year anyway. So this game now has sort of already created the kind of problem. This game sort of explains why I want to see Georgia Tech be great and win out, because we're playing the game anyway, right? Well, now they went out and lost to Pitt. They lost to NC State. They lost 2 of their last 3. They're barely hanging on the top 25. They were a top 10 team just 3 games ago. Now they're barely a top 25 team, okay? And once we beat them, if they're going to fall back out of the top 25. That's what happens if we beat them. So they may be able to win their bowl game, sneak back into the top 25, and finish the season as a team with 10 wins. They could end up 10-3 on the season as a top 25 team, showing improvement on the season. We might be able to look at that and say, hey, when you look at our resume and what we did last year, we beat all these teams that were top 25 teams that finished as top 25 teams and, had won 10 games or 9 games. So look, they've won 9 games, so they're going to be, they have a chance to finish as a 10-win team, whether they whether we beat them or not, and they have a chance to finish as a top 25 team, whether we beat them or not. But they also are at a point where, having lost these 2 games and being in the bottom of the top 25, if we lose this game, which we could, they're good enough to win the game, and it's a neutral environment. If we lose this game, well, now that's kind of embarrassing to us, okay? If they had been number 8 in the country still, well, now you got a 4 versus 8 matchup, and number 8 actually turns out to be the winner. And I'm not saying it's not bad to lose a game, take another loss, but the risk is all on our side in a game like this. Because Tech has lost their standing, we don't gain that much by beating them. If we beat this team that just lost to NC State and Pittsburgh, well, we're supposed to beat them. If we lose to them, then it's like, well, maybe all that momentum we thought Georgia had really wasn't there. And we're not going to, and possibly we tumble way out of the rankings, way down in the rankings for losing to a team that's not that great. But if you lose to a team that's in the top 25 or in the top 10, look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss came on the road, ranked in the top 10 against us. They lost a close, 1-possession game, 8-point game to us. And they stayed in the top 10, and then they've been able to fight their way back up to where they're number 4, 5, 6. They've been bouncing between 5, 6, and 7, 8 in the country. So they barely lost any ground after losing to us, because they went on the road and they played a top 10 team, a top 5 team, and they got credit for that. So we're guaranteeing ourselves a power team, a Power 4 conference team game every year, playing Georgia Tech, as we should, in this important rivalry. And this rivalry should just mean more to the country. It should be a game that people want to tune in to see. Great historical teams that literally hate each other in the name, and that are vying for the right for seeding in the playoff and the chance to go on and do great things beyond the season. That's why it should matter. And we should, if we're going to play this game and win it or potentially lose it, then the risk reward ought to be there for us. And as long as Tech continues to hit this glass ceiling and only be where they are this year, the losses they've taken in the last 3 weeks, 2 of the last 3 weeks, has again just turned this into a risk game for us with minimal reward. I mean, it's going to be a reward to play a hated rival and hopefully win the game. Again, a lot of people are going to laugh at them, and I just want to finish that point because if we go in and we win, we have an impressive game inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it's full of Georgia fans, people are going to mock them a little bit, and people already have been mocking them that they sold their home game for money and they're going to be outnumbered by Georgia fans. Well, look, I don't think that's actually that bad a deal. They were going to have that anyway. Every year when we play at Bobby Dodd Stadium, Georgia fans in the last 10 years have frequently outnumbered Tech fans. Tech has always acknowledged that Georgia fans are going to flood their stadium. In fact, they know Georgia fans who live in the metro Atlanta area, and that's many, that's legion of us, right? They know that Georgia fans have sort of figured out, hey, we could just buy season tickets it's cheaper, like when a game like this gets hot and the tickets are selling for $200-$300 a piece, it would have been cheaper or easier to just buy Tech season tickets and have the game included in the season tickets. Tech knows that. So for years, they've either put the Georgia game out separate, or they've created special things where you can only get the Georgia game if you buy the whole season ticket, or that you can only get the Georgia game if you buy the Wake Forest game and the other crappy games that they know are going to be lightly attended. Doesn't help. Georgia fans aren't typically going to show up for the Thursday night Wake Forest game or whatever just because they had to buy the ticket to it to get the fans, but Georgia fans have been buying Tech tickets from Tech and season tickets from Tech for years to get into that game and enjoy going to a game right in hometown. Since so many Georgia fans live in Atlanta, it's a fun, easy way to go in and get that game. And and most of the time, when you look at the stands at Bobby Dodd Stadium, they're at least 50-50, if not mostly Georgia fans. So look, I think that in this version, Tech actually has a chance to put more people in the stands. They're not going to get overwhelmed and outbid. I mean, they may get overwhelmed in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They may be more Georgia fans there, but there also could be more Tech fans there, and they're getting more guaranteed money for this instead of where Bobby Dodd has a lesser capacity. I forget what it is, but I think it's 57,000 or less. Well, now you can have 73,000 people at this game, and Tech is getting the money up front. They were already guaranteed what they get out of selling this game. So I don't think it really changes the equation, I guess is what I'm saying. They were already facing being outnumbered by Georgia fans in their own stadium. This is actually less embarrassing than having your own stadium be taken over in red. And this is a better deal because now they're not trying to wheedle the money out of Georgia fans directly, but maybe punishing their own fan base. Now they're able to just actually get the money from this entity, this outside third-party entity that's bought the game and marketing it, and they just get a guarantee. And so, look, I applaud Tech for the creative thinking. And honestly, again, big-time matchup like the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, a named game, Red River Rivalry, Texas and Oklahoma, a named game with a neutral site thing. Maybe we'd be better off. I mean, Georgia fans are not going to want to give up the home game, having Georgia Tech come the home game, but I'm not so sure that I mind if Georgia Tech wants to, for increased capacity, since their stadium is smaller than the least number of people that turn out for a Georgia game. And I guess that's one negative we can speak to real quick. Yes, the fans at Sanford Stadium, I mean, it was still listed because the tickets were sold. It was still listed at 93,033 sellout. And obviously there was 10, 20, 25,000 seats. There's probably 70, 72,000, 75,000 people, maybe 77,000 people at Sanford Stadium actually on Saturday. And after the big night game against Texas the week before, there was a threat of rain in this game. It had rained overnight. Charlotte coming in, not a great game. The beginning of some students have already gone home. There's only 1 or 2 days of classes left, Monday, Tuesday on campus. Some students had already gone home, not either having those classes canceled or they'd built up enough credit in those classes they could just skip those last class or two, go home for Thanksgiving holidays and be away. So the student section was light. Just a lot of factors involved in that. I don't want to make excuses. I think still top fan base, you'd like to see every game just be packed out and just be, full-throated enthusiasm all, to the highest level. But realistically speaking, a 12:30, 12:45 game following a rainstorm against a totally crappy opponent the week after a huge, big emotional game with the Texas game, and at a time where people are getting ready to disappear for vacation for up to the full week. This would be the first weekend, running into a Thanksgiving break for a lot of people. A lot of metro schools have, high schools, kids in high school, brothers and sisters of kids in college, and they have the whole week off for Thanksgiving. So a lot of families are going away for the holidays. That affected the attendance. So, a little bit of a downer to see the attendance, but back to the Tech game, I think we're going to see a big crowd. It's going to be really interesting to see how it turns out, how many Georgia fans, how many Tech fans. And yes, the Georgia fans may vastly outnumber and excite the Tech fans, although the Tech fans, we have two ways to see what happens to the Tech fan. Are they going to kind of collapse here in enthusiasm because the end of the season has had a little bit of a collapse? Are they going to be less excited? Like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they were number 8 in the country, or, they were in the top 10 and they were looking at a top 10 showdown and thinking this could be our year. We're going to take down Georgia, a national televised audience. And now they're thinking, crap, we're going to get our butts handed to us. We're going to get, we can't even beat NC State. And now we lost to Pittsburgh. And now we're, so now all of a sudden we're going to be, it's just going to be another big letdown. Is that how they're feeling about it? I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I expect that there will be an increase in Tech enthusiasm and Tech ticket sales to what you might see just at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Bobby Dodd Stadium, as I got off on that tangent, is smaller than the smallest crowd that would ever show up at a Georgia game. So there's a good chance this thing is packed out and that it's maybe 70-30 Georgia Tech fans. But even that would be a nice uptick. I mean, if Tech could get, let's see, you got 72,000. So let's say it's 40,000, 45,000 Georgia fans and 35,000 Tech fans. That's probably more Tech fans than are typically in Bobby Dodd Stadium for a Georgia Tech game. So that could be great. That could be a good showing. And I hope they do. I hope they come out and they see this as a stepping stone in the right direction. And look, obviously, the 8 overtime thriller, they were ahead most of the game last year. Obviously, they can win this game. They have the ability. Georgia seems to be playing better down the stretch of this season, peaking, whereas we were maybe limping into the end of last season. Hard to say. We had the big game against Tennessee towards the end of last year, beat them down, and then we turned around and we had the Tech game at home and we fell behind. We were in our pattern then of falling behind in the big games, and you saw from this week's game, look, Tech got behind against Pittsburgh, who's a decent to not too bad a team, pretty good team maybe, top 50, top 60 team. Pittsburgh came in there and got a big lead, and Tech rallied and got back within a score. So we're going to have to keep that in mind too. I mean, just jumping out to a 14-0 lead is not going to mean we're going to coast. They could come back, tie it back up, even take a lead. So it's going to take our guys playing really well. And it's not any advantage to us that we're probably going to be playing without CJ Allen, though other guys have been stepping up well. Having those guys be stepped up with CJ Allen on the field would be even better, knowing that Tech is one of the top offensive teams in the country. Not so much in points. In points, they're just a little bit ahead of us. They score in the 35.5 point range. We're averaging 33.7. But so they're still well inside the top 20, 25 in points scored. But in yardage gain, they were number 1 last week. So a little bit of a disparity there, but they're dangerous in that regard, and they could win this game. I don't think they probably will. I think the problems on defense make for a bad matchup because of how well our offense has played and how consistently our offense has been able. And in the 2 games where we had to have shootouts when the defense wasn't as on point as we would like, Ole Miss and Tennessee, in both games, the offense was able to have really impressive games. And I think against another weak defense, they could do that again. So my early impression is that it's going to be hard for Georgia Tech to win this game. We're going to break down, do full predictions and stuff later, but that's my first look at it. So listen, we're going to call it here for the day. This will be the Daily Dawg podcast for Monday. We're going to try and be back every day this week with the holidays leading up to and talk about topics. We got to look at I'll have to look at the timing because we're going to want to look and talk about breaking down the rankings, although I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement in the college football playoff rankings this week because there's just not that much happened to change those rankings. But we'll talk a little bit about why I think the rankings should be what I think they should be and give you a little more insight into how I came to those conclusions. I kind of spit it out before. We're going to talk about that. We're going to break down more about what Tech has done this season and how do we judge their season. What do we think the ceiling is for them going forward, and what do we want to see, and what do we think is going to be, what does it look like the matchups we could be facing, and what are we looking at as we start looking ahead into the playoffs with just one regular season game to go. Hard to believe we are already at the end of Georgia's regular season. This is the last of the 12 games we were guaranteed coming in on the season, and I just can't believe it's flown by. Thank you for being here and enjoying it with me. Please remember that you can watch the Daily Dawg podcast, the video version on YouTube. You can get the audio only on YouTube. You can get the audio where you get podcasts other places like Apple and Spotify. And you can always come to thedailydawg.com, which is at Substack, where you can see the video or audio podcast is available there. You can leave comments, send messages. Thank you to those of you who have sent messages. It was great to hear from you. Glad you liked the show. Glad you had much to say. And I hope you see that we at least took one suggestion to heart for one of you who made a suggestion. So hopefully that works better for you. And we are listening, and we love to get that feedback. Please tell people about the Daily Dawg. Let's get more people involved in the conversation. Please send comments. I would love to do a whole show where I just got to read out emails and comments and answer questions or just reply to things that people had to say. Love to hear from you. dailydawg.com. You can leave your comments, or you can probably do it from any of the other platforms as well. Also, we're on social media. We're on X. We're on you look for the Daily Dawg UGA or Daily Dawg-UGA at Facebook, Instagram, or X, and we are expanding our social platforms, and we're putting out the short videos there too. And the short videos are popping up, and a lot of times the short videos are just small clips of these bigger videos, but also a good thing to share and tell people about the Daily Dawg. So thanks again for being with me so far this season. Hope that we continue to build the audience and the conversation. This is Hate Week. Go Georgia. Go Dogs. Beat Tech, wreck Tech. That's what this week is all about. So let's not lose focus on that. Go Dogs.